an era where publishers want to give players anything but a straight-up single-player game with no shoehorned multiplayer or season pass nonsense, the purity of the no-bull story mode must be absolutely cherished. And so we, as players, must also support these games, and yet, sometimes we haven't always done our part. Hence why the fantastic single-player titles we're going to be talking about today all quickly faded into obscurity shortly after release. And I do mean we this time, because it's a community list after all, and this week J Headbird Clock is teaming up with me, and I will feature their pick later on in this video. And if you want to be part of next week's video, have a think on what you would pick for the spiciest, the naughtiest and/or downright rudest Easter eggs in gaming. Oh, it's getting me hot under the collar already, so let's move on and talk about the 10 best single-player games you never played. Number 10, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Now, to be completely fair to you, you can't really be blamed too much for sleeping on Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, given that it remains trapped on the Nintendo GameCube more than 20 years after it first released. But Silicon Knights' action-adventure game is a virtually peerless work of boundary-pushing genius. Its exploration and combat gameplay may seem familiar enough to begin with, but soon enough you'll be waylaid by sanity effects, reality-distorting hallucinations intended to mess with the player's perception of the game's reality. If the player lets their sanity slip sufficiently, they'll experience fiendish feats of trickery, like the game appearing to reset your GameCube, turning your TV's volume all the way down, implying that you've deleted your save data, and will even make blood drip from the walls, just to name a few. Eternal Darkness was rightly met with rave reviews by critics, yet failed to make a dent with general players, as was surely aided by the misguided GameCube exclusivity. Even after so long since its launch, it continues to be held up as one of the most singular games of its era, albeit one that's been played by only a tiny fraction of gamers. Number 9, Titanfall 2. Though Titanfall 2, of course, has a sizable multiplayer suite, the big talk surrounding the FPS sequel's release was the shockingly high quality of its single-player campaign, especially after the original game's story mode was, well, a big fat nothing burger. Titanfall 2's single-player offering may only clock in at around 4 to 5 hours, but it is unquestionably one of the most creative and unforgettable FPS campaigns of the last decade. From the bond you'll unavoidably forge with your trusty Titan BT all the way through to that jaw-droppingly inventive time travel mission and everything else in between, Titanfall 2's solo suite is an uncompromising banger. And yet, because EA had the good sense to sandwich its release between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, Titanfall 2 flopped upon launch, in turn causing the cancellation of an expected third game. Even accepting that Titanfall 2 enjoyed a surge in popularity when it finally launched on Steam in 2020, it's still one of the decade's best and most polished gaming experiences that a maddeningly small number of people have actually played. Number 8, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. Years before Ninja Theory peeved off everyone with their DMC reboot and then won their hearts back with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, they released this utter gem of the PS3 360 era, yet only like a grand total of about 17 people actually played it. Enslaved Odyssey to the West is a loose adaptation of the legendary Chinese novel Journey to the West, taking place in a post-apocalyptic future Earth ruled by mechs. Players control Monkey, a wild man who's forced to team up with a woman named Trip to help get her home. It might sound familiar enough, but Enslaved benefits enormously from its lushly imaginative game world, varied gameplay, and of course, a terrific central performance from Andy Serkis as Monkey. On top of this, it's about 8 hours long with no multiplayer slop shoehorned into it, which sadly may have actually been the reason that it bombed upon launch back in 2010. Today though, you can easily pick it up for the price of a cup of coffee, and if you don't, well, you're robbing yourself of a tremendously rich single-player experience. Number 7, Sunset Overdrive. Now on paper, Sunset Overdrive should have been a AAA franchise starting slam dunk, but instead it came and went with barely a peep in 2014. An open-world action-adventure game developed by Ratchet & Clank and future Spider-Man devs Insomniac Games, Sunset Overdrive is the dictionary definition of a game that doesn't take itself even one iota too seriously. Quite arguably the best Xbox One exclusive, this gloriously self-aware, in-your-face, willingly oversaturated romp feels like it's powered by the very same energy drink that turns its city's humans into mutants. Driven by frantic high-wire traversal and hilariously balmy weaponry in the vein of Ratchet & Clank, Sunset Overdrive is the typical open-world formula distilled down to its most valuable and purely fun components. A decade on from release, it still holds up tremendously well, even as many of its genre brethren feel dusty and dated, and With Microsoft now experimenting with releasing their self-published titles on PlayStation, what better time to port Sunset Overdrive to the PS5? Number 6. Bulletstorm. And so we come to Jay Hedberg Clock's entry, and my lord, is it an underrated banger. Coming from the chest-high walled mind of Cliff Bleszinski, Bulletstorm was the sorbet experience for those that thought that Gears of War was possibly getting a bit long in the tooth. Here, in place of, let's just call it tactical squatty potty training, Bulletstorm booted you onto a stage where creative kills are the order of the day. With a Batman belt full of strange devices and a world that could be described as a health and safety nightmare, it was up to you to chain together a ton of kills and build a hefty combo in the process. But what about Bulletstorm's story, I hear the purists cry. But what about this boot to the face, the game responds with, as who the hell cares about the cheesy one-note revenge tale when the action is this damn good? I never said that a best single-player game had to have a good story, it just needs to be a bloody good game, and it's a crying shame that this title couldn't find an audience. I mean, admittedly, the overabundance of swearing to placate edgy teens does get old real quick, but what doesn't, however, is a gameplay loop that deserved wider attention, especially today where games like Hotline Miami, Mullet, Mad Jack, and Angerfoot take the same high-action concept to great success. Still, we'll always know it was a low-key riot, right? Oh yeah, I forgot, most of you didn't even bloody play it. Number 5. Thomas Was Alone. Thomas Was Alone is one of those expertly laser-focused single-player indies that you'll kick yourself for not having played all of these years. The wicked smart 2012 puzzle platformer has players take control of several rectangular objects and use their unique abilities to get an entire group of them safely to the end of each level. Thomas Was Alone is by no means a brain-bustingly difficult game, but the just tricky enough puzzle design combines with gorgeously minimalistic visuals and a deliciously funny voiceover narration from Danny Wallace to make it feel like a truly one-of-a-kind experience. Again, proving the superiority of clever ideas over epic budgets, this is a game that belongs in the canon of crowned indie masterworks such as Journey, Super Meat Boy, Fez, and so on, and yet it never quite earned the same plaudits. Given that you can buy it for literally pennies these days, it'll take up a whole 3 hours of your life, and there's really no excuse for this thing to still be just a mere cult gem. Number 4. Marvel's Midnight Suns. Even if you're one of the many who immediately sniffs at the prospect of playing a card-based strategy game, Marvel's Midnight Suns is still probably for you. Stripping most of the tedium and busy work out of the card game formula while wrapping it in a shiny IP packaging, Midnight Suns is a straightforward yet ludicrously addictive tactical RPG. Boasting a beefy 30 hours campaign with a surprisingly robust story and more than a dozen playable superheroes, this is a game which is simple to pick up but becomes impressively intricate the more you invest in its nuanced gameplay. Despite receiving unexpectedly strong reviews from critics, however, Midnight Suns tanked at retail, with many pointing to its less than ideal December release date as the primary reason. Even so, the game has been only quietly whispered about in the 18 months since it launched, despite being a surprisingly brilliant fusion of traditional card combat mechanics with one of the most lucrative franchises on the planet. Number 3. Live Alive. Whether you play the 1994 original or its recent remake, Live Alive is one of the most criminally underappreciated RPGs ever made. With its epic genre and time-hopping narrative that plays out across 8 distinct settings, you'll probably expect this Square Enix-produced RPG to be dozens of hours long and eat up all of your free time for a solid month. But despite its dense narrative and huge cast of characters, you can comfortably sail through Live Alive in about 20 or so hours. Such is the game's concise, bloat-free nature. Each of the chapters feels totally different in terms of gameplay style, aesthetic, tone, and story, ensuring that there's never a dull moment as you do battle with an ancient evil known as Audio. For a game this expansive to also have tremendous respect for your time is virtually unheard of in the RPG genre, yet despite this, the remake didn't elevate Live Alive's profile all that much amongst the gaming audience in the modern era. Number 2. Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil is one of those great games that most folk are at least somewhat aware of, but few have actually bothered playing. Released in 2003, Ubisoft's ferociously inventive action-adventure game plonked players 400-ish years into the future on a mining planet where they control photographer/spy Jade as she fights back against the military dictatorship controlling the land. An impressive melange of competing gameplay elements which somehow slot snugly together, Beyond Good and Evil melds puzzle-solving, exploration, combat, stealth, racing, and yes, photography to dizzying effect. Couple this with an intriguing story and unforgettable characters, and it feels like the game should have become a valuable addition to Ubisoft's pretty sizable war chest. Yet, Beyond Good and Evil flopped commercially, and its legacy today is defined by, well, ending up on lists like this. Ubisoft announced a sequel way back in 2008 and then re-announced it in 2017, but after years of delays and radio silence, it's tough to believe that it will ever actually see the light of day. The original though, well, it can be snapped up for a couple of quid on Steam, so what are you waiting for? And number 1, Citizen Sleeper. Even those averse to games governed by dice rolls will struggle to resist the mesmeric pull of Citizen Sleeper, an RPG in which players take control of a digitized human or sleeper who has been placed inside a robot body. While fighting to survive and ensure their own freedom, players must make decisions governed by dice rolls, with higher dice numbers leading to more fruitful outcomes. Just as Midnight Sun simplified card combat for the masses, so too does Citizen Sleeper streamline dice-based RPGs, yet doesn't sacrifice the complexity of its story or characters. Driven forward by enticing cyberpunk aesthetics and a timely commentary about late-stage capitalism, Citizen Sleeper is a game that's been quite ironically slept on by far too many, even with its short 6-hour playtime. And yet, it evidently sold well enough for a sequel to be announced last summer, so praise be! But you know what? Before we get onto the sequel, play the bloody first game. And there we go, my friends. Those were the 10 best single-player games you've never played. I hope that you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. And if you want to be part of next week's video, have a think on what you would put for the spiciest, the naughtiest, and or downright rudest Easter eggs in gaming. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram and AX, where it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there, and hope you're treating yourself well, my friend, because you are the bloody best, and do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. Get out there and smash your life goals today. I believe in you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.